Hello, Canuck fans, and welcome to another edition of Canucks Conversation. He's Harm Dial. I'm Jeff Paterson, and Harm, is it any coincidence that on the first sunny Friday afternoon in forever, there's no sign of quads?
Especially during baseball season? Like, what are we talking about here? In the moment, too, that the Canucks are officially out of it. The very instant they're out of it.
They checked out, he's checked out, apparently.
I'm taking the Friday off.
Well, you're a better man for it, let me tell you. And I'm sure that the viewers and the listeners appreciate having you here. It's the last 2-day break between games for the Vancouver Canucks, so they will play every other night. I guess they play back-to-back here on the weekend, and then every other night to finish off. 7 to go, not mathematically eliminated. We're not going to do playoff odds. Quads is gone. He's taken the playoff odds with him. The Canucks are still alive, but that can end this weekend. If the results don't go their way, they could be mathematically, officially eliminated from playoff contention by Sunday when they take on the Vegas Golden Knights, of course. First up, it's an afternoon game, 1 o'clock start on Saturday at Rogers Arena against the Anaheim Ducks. Canucks Convo brought to you in part by Bet365. We should mention that Minnesota is the only team that sort of matters that's in action tonight. They're on Long Island. We'll get to anything else a little bit later on. St. Louis won again. Big deal. That's all they do. Although they're needing overtime an awful lot to get it done, to extend this streak. But again, we'll talk more a little bit about the St. Louis Blues later on. Again, the Canucks are playing out the string at this point, but there is a little bit of news here. They practiced out at UBC over the noon hour. Lacrosse floor down. The Warriors are playing tonight. Go Warriors. So the Canucks get bumped out to UBC on this Friday afternoon. Nils Höglander, back in a full regular practice jersey, had been out on the ice in a non-contact jersey. Haven't seen him since he left the Rangers game on the road trip. Sounds like he's going to return this weekend, but probably not tomorrow. And that, I guess, makes some sense. When you got back-to-back games, quite often the guy that's been out for any length of time, jumping right back in with games on consecutive days and not a lot of rest and recovery time. Probably doing right by Höglander here to play him one of the games this weekend. Tyler Myers doesn't sound like he's going to play. Left the game the other night in the third period. Undisclosed injury, but certainly sounds like Tyler Myers isn't going to be available for Saturday at the very least. And, of course, no Elias Paterson, no Philip Hedl. And then, they're already so short-staffed up front, Harm. We know this, and how thin down the middle. And our buddy PJ, Patrick Johnson, reporting Nils Åman left the building in a sling after practice, after crashing heavily into the end boards. And you can see on the live stream there, Brendan Batchelor tweeting, Åman took a scary fall into the corner boards at practice, had to be helped off the ice, did not look good. And at that point, he didn't have the information that PJ added, a sling for Nils Åman. So add him to the list of walking wounded and doubtful. If you're in a sling on a Friday afternoon, chances you're going to play on a Saturday. Are they going to have to raid Abbotsford once again here? I mean, how many more can they bring up from the farm? I guess they could bring up as many as they need. These are all going to be emergency recalls because they don't have any more forwards, but that's a tough break for Nils Åman, who is trying to make the most of his opportunity here with 7 games to go.
Yeah, I can't believe you teed me up to talk about Nils Åman, considering I feel like the week Quads and I had, we already far exceeded the threshold of acceptable Nils Åman talk. But the two interesting points there, I mean, with Myers potentially out tomorrow, I think this is going to be an exciting opportunity to see both Mancini and DPD in the lineup at the same time. Particularly, I want to see these guys down the stretch get some secondary PK minutes, especially since Derek Forbort is a pending UFA as well. And especially once this team is mathematically eliminated, the one barrier for a coaching staff when they're sort of looking to fill out the bottom of their lineup, and a large reason coaching staffs, not just this one, but around the NHL often defer to veterans, is because they like their third pair defensemen to be able to kill penalties at a high level. And for these young guys who don't have in DPD and Victor Mancini a lot of PK reps at the NHL level, give them that opportunity down the stretch here, because you don't want to end up in a situation where we saw what happened with Vasily Podkolzin, where he was never given an opportunity to develop that side of his game, even though when he was drafted, the way he was described was tenacious two-way winger. He can win battles defensively. Goes to Edmonton, and they immediately have him on the PK, and he's been a really serviceable PK penalty killer for the Oilers. So, I'd like to see Mancini and DPD maybe start to get spot duty. I'm not saying you roll them over the boards first PK unit, but give them a little bit of a dose here and there, shorthanded, to develop that side of their game too.
So I agree with you 100%. And this is two guys that cover this team for a living talking about this. Coach speak when they see Tyler Myers leave the lineup is, oh, well, we got Quinn Hughes. He can play 35 minutes now. We don't trust these young guys in games that don't matter. We can't play them an awful lot. So that's the downside of dressing two rookie defensemen is these guys don't seem to be able to help themselves in scaling back Quinn Hughes' ice time. And I do worry playing back-to-back, even though it's a day-night back-to-back. My gut tells me that they're not going to be able to limit Quinn Hughes' ice time.
Yeah, there should be like a 25-minute max cap on Quinn's ice time.
An alarm should go off in the building when he gets to 25
minutes.
Seriously,
like, what are we doing? What are you risking driving into the ground when he's playing through multiple injuries? The dude looks exhausted. He's clearly running on fumes despite what he's saying publicly, putting on a brave face, saying that he's 100%. You can see it on the bench. Right, we've seen the clips on social media of him sort of standing and appearing in some sort of discomfort. And we're not even clamoring for him. Oh, he's got to play 20 minutes like the rest of the bunch. Just give him normal number one defenseman minutes rather than treating this like you're desperately in the playoff race and you got to play him half the game.
So Rick in the chat says, were there any new lines at practice? Well, because we're hosting the show here that started at 2:00 live, neither one of us out at UBC, and quite frankly, I'm not sure that there was a huge reason to go to practice, but there were a few guys out there documenting it. But I think this also tells you kind of where the Canucks are in the season. Like, I didn't see a single person tweeting out line combinations at this stage. So, Rick, I don't have the answer because we weren't there to put our own eyeballs on it. But ultimately, look, they may have to call up Max Sasson. Like, if Nils Åman can't play and they need another forward, I would imagine that Max Sasson is probably the next guy up and has earned the opportunity. But in terms of line combinations, I know they didn't score the other night against Seattle, so the door would be open to trying some different things. But my hunch is that the guys they've got are the guys that they'll roll out there probably in the same line combos that you saw against the Kraken the other night.
Yeah, I've got a fun trivia question for you, kind of a side tangent here.
Oh, good.
Over the last 41 games, so last half of the season essentially, which Canucks forward leads the team in 5-on-5 points?
Disclaimer that I've done a little homework of my own on this one.
Of course you have.
No, but look, I think you and I hosted a rink-wide one time where I asked you about Nils Höglander and said, who's been I think I said, who's been the best Canuck forward since Christmas and why is it Nils Höglander? And you weren't ready to go there just yet then, but in terms of consistency, and I know that his numbers aren't off the charts, but nobody's numbers are off the charts in the second half of the season. So he's been consistently good. And just before he got hurt, the numbers, the offense, finally, you do the right things long enough, eventually you want to believe you're going to get rewarded, and he had been. So I'm assuming the answer is Nils Höglander.
Yeah, I was expecting him to be near the top, but I expected more like second or third, especially since he's missed 7 games. So for him to be leading Vancouver forwards in 5-on-5 points over the last 41 games essentially is quite a testament, because I think for a while there, the narrative too was he's playing well, the underlying numbers look good, they're outscoring opponents, but the bottom line maybe hasn't been there consistently enough. But at least at even strength, the production has been there. Now, the overall point totals don't look great because A, he doesn't produce on the power play, and B, he had that horrible start to the season, which put him behind the 8 ball, and he doesn't play a lot of minutes overall. But I was pleasantly surprised to see that, okay, it's not just the fancy stats, the actual point totals at even strength are there too. And of course, part of that is an indictment on the lack of high-end talent that, like, if Höglander's leading your team in 5-on-5 points for the last 41 games, that's great for Höglander. That's not great for the team in general. But as we discussed, Nils getting back into the lineup and looking to build on some of the success that he was having right before getting injured, I thought that was an interesting tidbit.
And I should double back here and correct myself, because if Nils Åman is injured and Nils Höglander is ready at some point, I know they had said Höglander wasn't likely to play both, but I wonder if this speeds up his return to the lineup, and it's a nils for nils swap this weekend. If Hochmatter's ready to go, then they probably wouldn't have to call up Max Sasson. But whatever the case, Abby's at home this weekend, so they're just down the road. Certainly have brought enough guys up in recent weeks that, hey, what's one more at this stage of the proceedings? It's funny, I joked off the top that it was a sunny day and Quads wasn't around. I think the real reason he isn't here, Harm, is he didn't want to show his face after the Family Feud episode performance yesterday. I was watching, and when he said the LA Kings had the worst logo in hockey, like you guys both, and you were guilty by association then, like you both had exactly what was coming to you. And I know that you came up short yesterday, but that was such a bad answer on Quads' part. I was sitting there just watching the show, and the LA Kings logo, of all the logos, yeah, there you go. There's nothing wrong with the LA Kings new old logo. So I think that's what it was, that you guys fell short yesterday, and Quads didn't want to show his face today.
I can't really be one to speak or chirp because I didn't have the best performance myself there yesterday. So as much as I'd like to join the parade, I can't in good faith rip on Quads.
I'll give Quads a tiny bit of defense. He didn't realize that the Kings switched their logo. He thought they still had their previous one, which would be more reasonable to say is among the worst logos.
And I tried to game the system because I thought Canucks fans hate the Bruins.
I didn't mind your line of thinking. Honestly, I didn't mind your line of thinking there, but apparently other people were actually focused on the logo itself and the details there. I just wanted to pick up quickly, and I don't want to go deep on awards, but you guys touched on it yesterday a fair bit. The fan voting is open right now. This is going to be Quinn Hughes' 6th straight Babe Pratt Award as the team's top defenseman. If he plays out his career in Vancouver, how many consecutive top D-men awards do you think he'd win?
Literally until he stops playing in the NHL.
Right.
Like they may as well rename it the Quinn Hughes
and at some point
award.
they might have to. They might have to look at that. But I mean, we would be looking at 15 on the low end if he's already at 6. And so, again, fingers crossed that they can find a way to convince him to sign on the dotted line and keep him here. But it'll be fascinating to see. How many MVPs will he win as well? This will be his first this year, and probably not his last. I would just think with the way that he has played here. All right, I don't want to go too deep on the Canucks and the Ducks. They're going to play. It's a game. It's going to happen, whether people want to watch it or not. But I'm going to ask you this, because there's back-to-backs this weekend. Thatcher Demko wasn't very good the other night against Seattle. Nobody was very good against Seattle. Demko was fine in Winnipeg the game before that, but he's lost his last 2 starts here. Kevin Lankinen, we haven't seen him since he got shelled in Columbus and gave up the 6 goals and then lost in the shootout. So, Coach Harm, put your cap on. How are you running out your goaltenders this weekend? And who's got more to prove in his next start in terms of bouncing back, whether it's Demko from 2 losses or Lankinen from, I guess it's been 2 losses for him as well because he lost the Rangers game and then when he got back in there, it was Columbus. At this late stage of the season, how are you running out your goalies and who's got more to prove?
I'll start with the second part first. Even though Lankinen's overall form through his last several starts has been worse than Demko's, because prior to Demko's last 2 starts, he came back looking really poised, sharp, and even before he got hurt right before the Four Nations break, he was on a bit of a heater. Even though Lankinen's recent play has been worse, I would say Demko has more on the line down the stretch, because Lankinen's sitting there with a massive new contract extension already in his back pocket. There really isn't a whole lot of expectation on him necessarily that he's got to carry the mail down the stretch. Now, it would be different if they were still in the playoff hunt, but for him, he's fine. He's had a solid year overall, not finishing the way he would have wanted, but it's understandable to some extent too, because of how large the workload was for him. And he had a career high in starts this season. Whereas for Demko, this is a guy who needs to stay healthy. This is a guy who needs to finish strong, because management's got this decision to make in the summer about, do they feel confident investing $9.5 million in net for next season, especially because Demko is technically eligible extension on July 1st, only 1 year left on his contract. That's going to be a decision that management needs to make. And for me, if you're Demko, it makes you feel so much better going into the offseason if you can stay healthy and finish strong performance-wise.
So who goes Saturday and who goes Sunday?
I don't mean to cop out, but this is honestly a conversation that I'd be going to Thatcher Demko. Like, my main priority, if I'm the Canucks at this point, is getting my number one goalie back on track, feeling good. The two dynamics you got to watch for in this back-to-back is, first of all, the Sunday one against Vegas is going to be much tougher. The opponent, second leg of a back-to-back, it's going to be a much tougher environment for the goaltender.
It is back-to-back for Vegas, too. They're in Calgary on the late game hockey night. Just throw that in there, too. But you're right.
Important context. The other part is the game tomorrow is a 1 p.m. start. So for goaltenders, like, how does Thatcher feel about the early start? Yeah. Like, for me, I want to put Thatcher in a position to succeed and feel good about his game. And so I'd lay out those dynamics to him and say, do you want to get back? Like, I'd basically say, pick your start. What do you feel most comfortable with? Do you want the tougher challenge in the more regular 7 p.m. slot, or do you want more of like a freebie, get back into the net sooner after a bad start? How does your body feel? Like, just I would honestly go to him and get his input and sort of decide based off that.
My sense is that it'll be Lankinen against the Ducks, and Thatcher probably wants to test himself. And as you said, a regular 7 o'clock start, extra day of rest, and get ready to take on Vegas, see if he can channel Bubble Demko from years gone by against the Vegas Golden Knights. Just two players I want to ask you about quickly here, as we were talking about some of the things that have gone sideways for the Vancouver Canucks this season. You mentioned Nils Höglander as one of the leaders 5-on-5. One of the guys that's been pretty quiet since Christmas at 5-on-5 is Jake DeBrusk. Now, he has a share of the team lead in goals at 24 with Brock Besser. He was brought in to score goals. He's going to get to 25. There's 7 games to go. I got to think that he's got another one in. We know that he's been streaky. Unfortunately, at crunch time here, when the chips have been down, he's been picking up assists, but has had trouble putting the puck in the net. Scored against Columbus, a power play goal. He has one 5-on-5 goal, Harm, since the Four Nations break. What do you make of that? And ultimately, for a guy that's paid $5.5 to come in and score goals, does it matter the game state in which he puts the puck in the net? Like, are you concerned moving forward that he hasn't been a 5-on-5 producer and that he's been a power play merchant? Or they just need guys to put the puck in the net, and hey, if he scores on the power play, great. If he scores at 5-on-5, that's great too.
To me, the 5-on-5 production hasn't been good enough. And yeah, you do need more, but I'm not overly worried about it. And the primary reason for that is because his centerman, Elias Paterson, has been wildly disappointing this year, right? The whole expectation in the summer was that this was going to be the dynamic duo, Paterson and DeBrusk. DeBrusk has never been a guy who has been leaned on in his career to drive a top 6 line on his own. And it's not like he's paid $7-8 million to do that. He's paid tidy $5.5 million, which, especially with the cap going up, is a fairly reasonable ticket. So to me, if Paterson had played up to his potential, I bet you DeBrusk's 5-on-5 scoring numbers would be significantly better, because Paterson at his peak can drive a lot off the rush. He can create a lot of controlled entries. He can draw defenders towards him, and that gives his wingers a lot of space. We saw that especially 2 years ago when he and Kuzmenko were cooking, when for a while Anthony Beauvillier was finding all that 5-on-5 success with Paterson. I think without Paterson being able to drive much of a rush game, DeBrusk's offensive damage at 5-on-5 has been limited to just around the net, like the greasy areas, which is the biggest strength of his game. But if Paterson was playing up to his potential, I think that would have unlocked DeBrusk's rush scoring game as well, which I don't think we've seen very often at even strength this year. So to me, when I step back, overall, you're looking at him having a 25 goal, 45 point season, which is what he's always been in Boston. And so for him to sort of reach that level again when his primary playmaking center is having a miserable season, I'll take that with the understanding that, hey, DeBrusk should score more next season, especially at 5-on-5 if Paterson bounces back. If there is one area that I've been disappointed with him, it is that I've been underwhelmed by his impact on other parts of the game when he isn't scoring, like especially on the forecheck. This is a guy that, has some size, is a fast skater. I expected him to be more of a menace on the forecheck, and even watching him during last spring's playoffs against the Leafs, he was really noticeable in that facet. He was giving Toronto's defensemen difficulty moving pucks, and I just feel like he hasn't had that edge. He hasn't maybe been physical enough. He hasn't forced enough turnovers on the forecheck, won enough battles. I would have just liked to see him more noticeable in those parts of the game. But and having said that, his overall two-way numbers are still pretty solid. So overall, I'd say expectations for him, considering the context of his primary center struggling, he's met expectations.
The other guy that I want to ask you about quickly, and then want to move on to a bunch of other things, but Philip Hronek, who, when Quinn Hughes was out, and this all stemmed, yesterday I wrote a column at CanucksArmy just looking at some surprising numbers since the Four Nations break and kind of, why things have slipped away from the Canucks, even though, they've got the best penalty killing in the National Hockey League since the Four Nations break. They've opened the scoring more than any other team in the National Hockey League. Like, they've had leads and it hasn't yielded victories. But one of the things that surprised me, just in raw numbers, all situations, only 2 players in the league have been on the ice for more goals against than Philip Hronek since the Four Nations break. And when Quinn Hughes was out, I thought he actually stepped up and took on a work. Like, you think of that game against Toronto just before the break when he scored that backdoor goal from Elias Paterson, but he was logging big minutes. He was contributing offensively. And so I was just surprised at how many goals have been scored against the Vancouver Canucks with Phil Hronek on the ice. What have you made of his play here in the last 6 weeks or so?
He definitely has struggled over the last 20 games or so. He's surrendered high danger chances at 5-on-5 and actual goals against per 60 at the highest rate of all Canucks defenders. Canucks have been outscored 22-14 at 5-on-5 in that time frame. Now, it is worth noting that a large chunk of that is probably attributed to some bad luck. It's only got a 94 PDO in that stretch.
Yeah.
And the on-ice save percentage there is .850, which is brutal. And so mistakes get amplified when they end up in the back of your net, right? Nobody remembers the slot pass that you weren't able to get your stick on when it leads to a scoring chance that your goaltender bails you out on.
For sure.
Everybody remembers the slot pass that you weren't able to deny when it ends up in the back of your net. And when your goalies aren't making mistakes, or when your goalies aren't making saves, those blunders get way more of an attention and a spotlight than they normally would. And having said that, I am noticing that he is losing more puck battles down low. He hasn't been as disruptive in those passing and shooting lanes on the inside. I think Quinn and Hronek together over the last 2 or 3 weeks have had leaky defensive performances. So yeah, he hasn't been good enough defensively. Some of that I chalk up to bad luck. Some of that I chalk up to his individual defending. Needs to be a bit better. It's been interesting to dissect his season as a whole, though, because on the one hand, I think the positive is that, to me, he's proven that he isn't just a Quinn Hughes merchant this year. For the reasons you outlined, when he's been out of the lineup, even going back to November, the Ottawa game,
right?
When he just logged massive minutes. Hughes got kicked from that game for that hit on Norris, which was still such a ludicrous 5-inning game for that. Like, wow, okay. And on top of that, we really saw how much Hronek means to this team when he went down with an injury in the first half of the season. This blue line had problems, had issues. But it is also interesting that Hronek's results with Quinn just overall haven't been as dominant as they were last year. Tyler Myers' results with Quinn Hughes in the first pair have actually been, across the board statistically, better. I was actually surprised at how dominant Quinn and Myers have been together. You're talking about nearly 400 5-on-5 minutes where they've controlled 57% of shots, 58% of expected goals, and outscored opponents 21-10. Now, when it's been Hronek and Hughes, the shot and scoring chance control metrics are still really strong. They're about the same, but 29 goals for, 30 against. So -1 goal differential. And again, some of that is the PDO luck, but right. It's been an interesting year to evaluate Hronek overall. I think on the balance, he's met expectations. He's proven that he's a good number 2-3 defenseman on a contender, but no doubt that over the last 6 weeks or so, his play has slipped.
I want to ask you about another defenseman that the Canucks are going to see on the other side tomorrow when Anaheim's in town. So we'll get to that in a sec. But this segment of Canucks Convo, a presentation of the Pacific Toyota dealers who want to tell you about the Toyota BZ4X. You hear Quads talking about it all the time. 100% electric. It's backed by the peace of mind of knowing it's a Toyota and that spark of joy you get when you pass a gas station knowing that you don't have to stop. It's got all sorts of cargo capacity for hockey gear or baseball equipment. Now as the sun starts to shine, golf clubs, you can get a couple of sets of golf clubs in there, and it can handle any terrain, so it can take you from the city to the slopes or wherever your life takes you. And when you choose the BZ4X, you can get up to $6,500 in rebates and incentives, and right now you can finance a 2025 BZ4X from 0.99% APR for 36 months. Visit shoptoyota.ca or your local Pacific dealer today. We said off the top, Harm, that the Canucks are still clinging to their playoff lives. We're not going to go down that road. But I mentioned that because Anaheim was officially eliminated. Not that the Ducks were going to get to the playoffs, but the plug was pulled on them last night when they lost in Calgary, gave up a goal in the first 15 seconds, tied the game. Olin Zellweger, one of their fine young defensemen. But that was it. Calgary took over from there. John Gibson was hurt. Lucas Dostal came in. I would imagine the Canucks are going to see Lucas Dostal on Saturday afternoon. The Ducks are behind the Canucks in the overall standings on the season, but since mid-December, Anaheim is actually 4 points in front of the Vancouver Canucks. So I ask you, as we sit here right now, the Canucks don't have to worry about the Ducks because neither of these teams is going to be in the playoffs, but how soon do the Vancouver Canucks have to consider not so much looking forward at McDavid and Draisaitl in Edmonton and Vegas, what it does every year, but over their shoulder at a team like the Anaheim Ducks?
They're coming. It's there are a few things that I'm keeping an eye on with the Ducks. I mean, first of all, overall, they've taken they're on pace for like a 20 to 22 point improvement, which is substantial. Number one, what do they do in the offseason? Last summer, they didn't do much as far as actually adding quality win now pieces. The year prior was when they went out and signed Killorn and some other guys and added some more expensive contracts to the books. But they have a ton of cap space at their disposal. Do they actually do anything exciting with it? Do they land a big fish, either like especially up front or maybe another stud on the blue line? The second thing is they've got so many intriguing blue chip prospects that can one or two of those guys really pop next year? Like Leo Carlson, Mason McTavish, who's been a lot better in the second half and could be a breakout candidate for next season. Cutter Gauthier, even on the back end, we've seen Jackson Lacombe take a huge step, but Pavel Mintyukov, who was really good as a rookie last year, has been a little bit more up and down this year. Zellweger, you mentioned. For young teams like this, if one of those guys, especially like a Carlson or a McTavish, really goes from okay, he's a good young player to okay, this guy's arrived as a star, that can really propel a franchise forward, especially if the Ducks also make serious upgrades in the summer with all the cap space they're going to have at their disposal. Now, the one thing that's difficult and could prevent them from really shooting up the standings is they've been really reliant on goaltending this year. Now, on paper, Dostal and Gibson are one of the better goaltending tandems in the NHL, but goaltenders are more volatile than forwards and defensemen.
But Dostal looks like the real deal. Like this guy, he's been doing it for a couple
I fully
seasons
agree.
Yeah.
I fully agree. And yet, goaltending is just one of those positions where, especially in tough defensive environments, which the Ducks haven't fully cleaned up yet either, like guys can be up and down. Like I look at somebody like an Ilya Sorokin, right? For a while there, he was in the same category as like the Shesterkin, like elite, like this guy should be contending for Vezinas. And he's only been okay the last couple of seasons. Now injuries mixed into the equation as well. But goaltenders are just tougher to project. So I think the path for the Ducks to being competitive next year for the playoffs, I don't think it's the most likely outcome, but it would have to hinge on their goaltending continuing to be the biggest strength on their roster. They need one or two of their young forwards to pop, which I genuinely don't know how likely that is because they have the talent to do so, but I don't know if Greg Cronin is the right coach to unlock that from them. So we'll see. And then third, what do they do in the offseason to actually upgrade the roster? I lean towards that team more being 2 years away from making a serious playoff push. But if those three things happen, then yeah, the Ducks are going to be another team that is contending for a playoff spot next year.
And keep in mind, they had the third overall pick last year at the Sphere. They took Bennett Seneke, had an 80-plus point season in the Ontario Hockey League, so he's on the way. And they're going to get another pretty solid draft choice, and who knows, maybe they win the lottery and shoot right up to the top. So, yeah, I mean, their system is starting to produce. It is funny, too, when Greg Cronin, like you mentioned, a 20-point bump, and people are still questioning whether, is he the right guy? Does he deserve more of an opportunity? So we'll see what happens there. But speaking of the draft, with the Ducks in town, I just thought, look, it's a sunny day. It kind of got me thinking that now we're going to start focusing on the Vancouver Canucks in the draft. You can see on the live stream there, one of the subtopics that I wanted to touch on was the 2019 draft. And why the 2019 draft? Well, Jackson Lacombe, as you mentioned. Well, first of all, the 2019 draft was here in Vancouver on a sunny afternoon in late June. And I remember it for a couple of reasons. One is we had just lost Botch. And that night at the Commodore on the eve of the draft when were you working at the Athletic then?
So that was a really interesting story because I was, but the Athletic already had too many. I was a freelancer. And so the Athletic already had too many credentialed media there. So Thomas Stranz, our good buddy, was working for the Florida Panthers at the time in PR, and he set me up to cover the draft for the Miami Herald for the Panthers, where they picked Spencer Knight. So yeah, I was covering the Panthers at the draft there, and yeah, that was a fun story.
Stranz always pulling strings. But an incredible night, tribute night. We'll always remember. Packed house, so many people, all the athletic staff from around the National Hockey League. So that one jumps out at me. But as for the draft itself, Jackson Lacombe and Nils Höglander went back-to-back in the second round. Trevor Zegras went one pick ahead of Vasily Podkolzin. You mentioned Podkolzin earlier on the show. Drew Hellison is now part of the Ducks. He was drafted by Colorado, but he was a second rounder there. So there's all these ties to this 2019 draft. And I was just thinking, as we take a second and look back, usually now with so many young players making it to the NHL at the top of the draft, at least fairly early, like I think 5 years out is fair game to look back and sort of assess what you've got. We're coming up on 6 years from this draft, and you can see there on the screen, Jack Hughes, Capo Caco, Kirby Dach. So 2 and 3 have already been traded in their NHL careers, Bowen Byram as well. But this draft arm, actually, as you look back, like if Jack Hughes didn't get hurt this year, he would have got to 400 games in the National Hockey League, 6 years out from his draft. So he's a star. Kako and Dach have had their moments, and Kako now in Seattle. We saw him the other night. But you look a little deeper down. Moritz Seider, obviously, has become a linchpin in Detroit. And then a couple of others, Broberg doing his thing in St. Louis now. But how do you look 6 years out, or almost 6 years out, when you look back at that 2019 draft? You put your Miami Herald press pass, your hat back on. What jumps out at you from the top of that 2019 draft?
Yeah, it's a strong draft class overall. I think definitely the 2 to 5 range underwhelmed, right? Like Kako was expected to be a franchise winger, didn't turn into that. Dach is a winger, right? When he was expected to be number one centerman. Byram, between the concussions and the inconsistency in his play, he's having a good year in Buffalo, but hasn't fully turned into the star that I think a lot of people were expecting. Turcotte has finally become an everyday NHL player, but he's just a grinder at this stage.
Yeah.
But when you move further down, there have been some real stars that have come out of this group. I mean, like outside the top 10, you got Thomas Harley, who, especially with Heiskanen out and how well he played for Team Canada at the Four Nations, is showing that he's a legit top pair caliber stud. Dustin Wolf is having a phenomenal campaign. He looks like a franchise goaltender. Cole Caulfield, obviously, in Montreal, looks like they're gonna hopefully punch their ticket into the playoffs. You got Matt Boldy, and then Jackson Lacombe is quietly having a monster breakout campaign. So you've had a lot of players panning out outside of the top 10. And when I look at even just the top 18-ish picks in general, not a lot of outright busts, right? Even some of the guys in the teens like Cam York, Spencer Knight, Alex Newhook, they've at least become like good NHL players, even if they're not necessarily stars.
Well, the top 34 guys selected have all touched NHL ice, which is pretty remarkable. And with Anaheim in town, it's kind of interesting too that they whiffed on Braden Tracy, kid out of Moose Jaw. I think he played in Victoria for a little bit as well. He was the 29th pick that year. He's played one NHL game, but it shows you that when you have that many prospects at the top of your stable, you can afford to miss on the occasional one. If you're the Vancouver Canucks and you whiff on Jake Virtanen and Olli Juolevi, and a bunch of years later you whiff on Vasily Podkolzin, obviously it's coming back to hurt you now. But the Ducks, would they have liked Braden Tracy to turn out? Sure, but that one didn't happen. But Jackson Lacombe certainly did, and he was the 39th pick that year. I know you wrote a piece at The Athletic the other day about some of the most underrated defensemen in the National Hockey League, and he was he at the top of the list? If not, he was right up there. For people that don't know Jackson Lacombe, just turned 24. He's a left shot D out of the state of Minnesota. He was a 4-year guy at the University of Minnesota. His production improved every year at the college level. Second round pick, as we said, one spot ahead of Nils Höglander. Skipped the AHL. He's never played a game in the minors. And now in his second full season in the NHL, 14 goals, 29 assists, 43 points in 67 games. What have you seen in Jackson Lacombe, and what a find in the second round for the Anaheim Ducks?
Yeah, he's become their clear-cut number one defenseman. Since mid-December, he has more even-strength points than Quinn Hughes. Like, there you go.
For a sec, yeah. Wow.
And on the Anaheim Ducks, right? He's fourth among all NHLD in that time frame in terms of even strength points. Just Werenski, Dowling, and Makar have scored more even strength points than Lacombe since mid-December. You watch him play, and he's just a beautiful puck transporter. He skates it so well. One man sort of a machine there in terms of transporting the puck up the ice. And we saw it the last time these two teams met. He scored that goal in the third period to kind of ice the game. He's dynamic in terms of how he drives a slot. And the other thing to keep in mind is this is a number one defenseman who doesn't have a great partner. Doesn't get to play with a Phil Peronic or a Devon Taves quality partner. He's mostly been playing with Radko Gudas, who is a decent defenseman, but at this stage in his mid-30s isn't really a true talent top pair guy. And to put up these types of point totals when the Ducks power play has been that this abysmal this season, this is a guy who would be knocking on the door of 60, 70 points if the Ducks actually had a good power play and had weapons around him.
Well, we'll certainly be watching him as the Vancouver Canucks take on the Anaheim Ducks at 1 o'clock start on Saturday. We should just mention that Nils Höglander, from that 2019 draft class, spent time in the American Hockey League, has been in and out of the lineup, injured, 7th in goals and 11th in points from the 40 spot. So, again, the Canucks couldn't get what they were hoping in Vasily Podkolzin, but Nils Höglander certainly has overachieved based on his draft position and where he is in the actual point production in his time in the National Hockey League. We should also mention Washington got Alexei Protas in the third round that year. Vegas got Pavel Dorofeyev in the third round. He leads them in goals. And you mentioned Dustin Wolf, 214th overall in the 7th round. There were only 3 picks after him that year in the draft. One of them was Arvid Kosmer, the Canucks pick. But even the Canucks that year, like Artur Silovs was the 6th round pick. That 2019 draft has yielded an awful lot, not even 6 years out. All right. I think that's it for that 2019 draft. Just a little trip down memory lane. But want to get to anyone else, and we'll do that in a sec. But first things first, want to tell you about Greta Bar YVR. And we talk about it all the time. It's a great place to go and watch any sports action on all the big screens that they've got there before, after the game. Great place to gather as well. And we've got a Canucks Army watch party coming up on Thursday. Yes, the Canucks are limping to the finish line, but hopefully we can all get together one last time and just have some fun. Doors open at 5. The game is at 6. Vancouver's in Colorado. It's all presented by Fountain Tire and in support of Kids Sport Vancouver. General admission tickets are $10. Or you can snag a VIP ticket, $40. It includes a burger, a beer, and an arcade game card. You got to be 19 plus to attend. Secure your spot now and join the Canucks Army crew for a fun night. For tickets, go to nationgear.ca. And I do hope people will join us there. This is going to be the last one for this season. And again, the stakes are not high, but hey, any chance to watch Nathan MacKinnon and Cale Makar and the Colorado Avalanche? Hopefully the Canucks can find a way to slow them down and keep them in check, because as we get into anything else now, top of my list, Harm, is Cale Makar. Scored his 30th goal of the season last night in Columbus. And I know it's Columbus and everybody's getting cookies in Columbus these days. Elvis can't stop a puck, but 30 goals, 60 points, or 60 assists, 90 points for Cale Makar with still a handful of games to go. He has separated from the pack. As much as you want to believe that Quinn Hughes was going to be in the running to defend his Norris and Zach Werenski gave it all he could, Cale Makar has pulled away from the competition. I got to think he's the Norris Trophy winner this year.
Probably, yeah. I think for Werenski or Hughes to have end up winning it, it would require their teams making the playoffs and having that narrative and push. Still some hope for Columbus, so we'll see. I don't think Werenski's totally out of it as far as the Norris, but I think Quinn at this point is also just missed too much time, and because he's been playing banged up, I don't think we've seen the best version of Quinn the last handful of games anyway.
And look, this happened to Makar a couple of years ago. He played 66 games. He was a point-a-game guy then, but there is an element of being available and playing the bulkier games. And it's not a knock on Quinn. And this isn't a Quinn versus Cale Makar. We used to do that a lot. Let's just celebrate that these guys, the way they have transformed the position, are both incredible. They're trending to skate right through the front door of the Hockey Hall of Fame. We should want them both to be healthy at all times so that we can watch more of them. And let's hope that they battle for years and years for the Norris. I think both of them probably have multiple Norrises left in them, although it's going to be a battle. Both of them sort of just entering the primes of their careers. We mentioned off the top, St. Louis Blues won again, 11 straight. They beat Pittsburgh 5-4 in overtime. They let a lead get away. I guess that's a little wrinkle. I don't know if they got disinterested at 4-2, but Pittsburgh scored a couple of late goals, go to overtime, and of course it was Robert Thomas this time. But you think the Canucks pushed them to overtime, Blues won. Detroit the other night, St. Louis needed a late goal, won it in overtime. They're just finding ways. It's ridiculous, and you do wonder, are they ever going to lose again?
Bad news for them though. Dylan Holloway was announced out week to week. And that forget the win streak. You need him healthy round one if you're gonna be going up against potentially the Vegas Golden Knights in round one. I think the Blues, if Holloway is healthy, and especially if they get Parayko back, they could really push the Golden Knights here, who after the Four Nations break were starting to find their groove again, especially in early to mid-March. They were beating some Eastern teams, but lost 4-0 to the Winnipeg Jets last night. Also lost to Edmonton recently. Just hearing Bruce Cassidy talk about his team, they're not hitting the panic button, but he straight up said he's a little bit concerned about his team's play right now. It's not great to have a team that isn't exactly firing on all cylinders when you've got a potential round one opponent in St. Louis that's rattled off 11 straight. So Holloway's health at this point is going to be the biggest storyline to track with the Blues down the stretch. I really hope he's able to stay healthy because he's been such a driver for them, one of their best forwards, and they need him.
I watched a fair bit of Montreal and Boston. I'm on board the Montreal train. I am. They're just a fun team. They're likable. Suzuki has gone nuclear. And Cole Caulfield up to 35. And that goal that he scored last night, the toe drag from Suzuki, slides it across. Caulfield, the right shot on that left-hand side, makes no mistake. What I didn't notice, I know that the Bruins have scuffled. I've sort of followed Lindholm and Zadorov all season long. Harm, they've lost 10 in a row. I didn't realize that the Boston Bruins had lost 10 in a row, 0-9-1. 56 Bel Air in the chat says Boston's race to the bottom's all about a 1 or 2 draft position. Vancouver's never tanked for drafts. Maybe time to take a hard look at doing what Chicago and others have done. It is wild to think that it wasn't that long ago the Boston Bruins picked up 135 points in the regular season, smashed records. They stand a pretty good chance of picking 1 or 2 this year in the draft, depending on how the lottery balls fall.
Yeah, I mean, It isn't overly surprising when you consider, like, after the trades they made and McAvoy's still out, like, just pull up their lines.
Yeah.
It is like they've got Cole Kopka on the second line, Fabian Lysell. Their third line is Kuznetsov, Middlestad, and Vinny Lettieri. On the back end, like, just go through their top 6 defensemen. Sidorov, Yoki Haru, Parker Wotherspoon, Andrew Peak, Mason Lohrei, Ian Mitchell, and then you've got this is the key part, right? Jeremy Swayman, who's supposed to be an elite goaltender, has really struggled this year. So you can sort of understand why post deadline.
Get that off the screen, Jacob. It's scary. It's frightening.
It's ugly.
We've got kids watching.
Like they can't score. They're so lifeless to watch offensively. I'm not totally surprised that they're on this type of skid.
But 10, man, that's double digits. Yeah. That's heavy. And I, like, again, I knew they were bad. I didn't realize that that's where they were right here, right now, in that sort of streak. So we'll see if the Bruins are able to muster a victory here before the season is done. We're talking about streaks. We're talking about the St. Louis Blues, talking about the Boston Bruins. We should mention here that the Abbotsford Canucks are at home this weekend. Their streak up to 11. They just went and swept a California road trip. They've clinched a playoff spot. 7 games remaining for Abby, 4 at home, and then they finished with 3 on the road in California. Again, we'll see if the big team has to put in a call. They're at home to Laval tomorrow and Sunday, and I love this, Harm, because you've got the hottest team in the American Hockey League and the Abbotsford Canucks testing themselves against the best team in the American Hockey League, the Laval Rocket, the Montreal Canadiens farm team, the top team in the American Hockey League. So if this streak is going to endure, they're going to have to go out there and earn it. But honestly, I think there'll be more intensity out in Abbotsford on Saturday and Sunday than there will be at Rogers Arena, where the big league team really has very little to play for.
Oh, yeah, and our attention is quickly going to turn to Abby, especially when it comes to playoffs, and most importantly, most intriguingly, when Tom Willander's season is over at BU, does he sign an ELC that starts next season, and rather than burning, like playing an NHL game or two and burning the first year of his ELC off, does he sign an ATO and go down to join Abbotsford? Because at that point, I mean, what would that do as far as reinvigorating interest in the Abbey Canucks, who are already rolling? Like, that would be a fun, exciting product to watch. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with Willander, and poor Manny Malhotra. He deserves some reinforcements after all his guys, especially up front, have moved up to the big club.
Well, and it's wild to think that he is going to get essentially a top American Hockey League line back, and yet that's going to bump some guys that probably don't deserve to come out of the lineup. But I mean, that's just life in pro sports. It's a good problem to have, but also some of those guys probably thinking, like, you know, I got to be busting my butt here just to keep my place in the lineup, because they're going to get this airdrop in pretty soon. And as we said, there's 7 games remaining for Abbotsford this week against Laval, next week against Calgary, and then out on the road for the final 3. So we shall see what happens there. But the streak's at 11 and counting, and I hope people out in the Valley, I hope people in Metro Van are making the trek out the highway to catch the Abbey Canucks, and I'm sure people will once the playoffs begin. All right, breaking news coming in from Bet365, where every nail-biting overtime win is a barn burner, every face-off, hat-trick, power play, shot on goal, penalty shot, and every suspenseful minute in between is amazing. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365, an official partner of the NHL. Download the Bet365 app and use the code NATION to get in on the game. Must be 19 years or older. Please play responsibly. Ovi Watch is on again. Needs 3 for his place in history all by himself. The Washington Capitals taking on the Chicago Blackhawks. This is just going to be putting it on a tee for Ovi all night long. So I wanted an Ovi line for our bet of the night here, and I'm going with 5 Ovi shots on goal. Again, I just think that the Caps are going to, against the Blackhawks, just going to work the puck to Ovechkin as often as they can. And I think it's going to be a shooting gallery. So I'm taking Ovi with 5 shots on goal in this hockey game.
I like it.
I mean, he's within range now. I mean, a hat trick gets him there, and it could happen. The commissioner's starting to follow him. Wayne Gretzky's starting to follow him, and we shall see. He's got 2 games left against Columbus. And I talked earlier, like, Columbus can't keep a puck out of its net right now. Like that has to, I would think anybody just looking at it logically would say one of those Columbus games has to be the record breaker because the Canucks got 6, Colorado got 7 last night. Like everybody's getting theirs against the Blue Jackets. And wouldn't surprise me if Ovi found his way into the history books against the Jackets as well.
Yeah, and if there's a goaltender, I don't ever really wish these things upon anybody, but if there's a goaltender who I wouldn't mind seeing being the one that's on the highlight reel loop for years and years to come, Elvis Merzlikins, for like, I'm sure he's a good dude, but how cocky he is for how mediocre he is as a goaltender. Like some of the celebrations, in the shootouts, it's like, dude, you barely scraped a 7-6 victory. You were awful in the game. What are you doing? And it's just, I don't love the antics with Elvis. And I'll be honest, I wouldn't mind if he's the goaltender that OV scores on.
He'd probably tell you, "Hey, it's camera time for me. It's a good thing. Like, forever I'll be immortalized in history." But you're right. The shootout with you've given up 6, man. Like, yeah, good on you. You stopped a shootout shot, but park the celebrations. I'm with you there. All right, we got ourselves a weekend of Canucks hockey here. The games themselves don't matter, but they will play them. And this is what happens when you back into your schedule with all these home games that, if you're in the mix and you hope that home ice can get you something, great. But when you've flushed your chances, now you just got to play out home games on a sunny Saturday afternoon against another non-playoff team. It'll be interesting, the environment in there. We haven't seen Vegas and Vancouver, so there's probably some that, wanted tickets for the Vegas Golden Knights, see a legitimate Stanley Cup champ, Jack Eichel, He's having a remarkable season. I don't know if people recognize, like, he's 30 points ahead of anybody else on his team. So a little more intrigue, I think, for Sunday. One of 2 visits, by the way. Vegas is back for the season finale for the Vancouver Canucks in 10 days' time. So we'll see what the weekend brings. We'll see if we can find Quads and get him back for you on Monday. Rain returns, and Quads will just magically show up on Convo on Monday with 2 games to break down and talk about. But he is expected to be back here, so we look forward. I'll be a viewer at that point. I'll just sit back and watch you guys do your things. Just leave us with a thought or two. What are you looking for from this Canuck weekend?
Just for the ticket-paying customers that are there, you've laid an egg on home ice so many times, and especially coming off that Seattle game, at least compete, score some goals. You don't have to win the games, but just you can't have many more performances like the one they had last game against Seattle. So that's the only thing is give your home fans something to cheer for in a season that's otherwise lost. There may not be a lot of viewers on TV necessarily, but for the fans that actually show up to the rink and are still forking over a ton of money, give them something to cheer about.
All right, we had Scott in the chat said, "I want to hear Jeff and Harm's cup predictions and playoff power rankings as of now." I'm always loath to give out predictions until I see the matchups because I'm a big matchup guy at playoff time, and I don't know who's going to get the St. Louis Blues, but I wouldn't want any piece of the St. Louis Blues right now. But I will say this, and Vegas stops off in Calgary on Saturday before they're here. Vegas isn't going to be in a very good mood. They got shut out by Winnipeg on home ice last night. I saw the Canucks play hard in Winnipeg at the end of the road trip, but ultimately the Jets just kind of leaned on them in the third period. And the Jets did that with their backup goaltender in Vegas, too. They gave Connor Hellebuck the night off. But the more I watch the Winnipeg Jets, and I get that they've got playoff hurdles and playoff ghosts and history and all that stuff that they've got to clear. But the way Connor Hellebuck has played all season, I just think he is so dialed in and determined. Winnipeg's got to come over the 30-year Canadian team drought too, but I like the Jets. I just like the way that they're built. I like the way their top end has gone, the support players as well. So I'm sort of buying into what the Winnipeg Jets are putting down.
What's crazy about the Jets too is so since the Four Nations break, they're 13-6-1, right? So a 675 points percentage. That ranks 4th in the Central Division in that time frame. Because you've got the top 3 teams in the league as far as points percentage in that time: St. Louis, Dallas, Colorado. It's funny because they keep rolling, they keep stacking up these wins, and yet their competition, especially because a lot of these teams like Colorado loaded up at the deadline, becomes that much stiffer. Yeah, I mean, we know the Jets are a wagon at this point. I think Colorado's a real threat. That's a team that I'm really keeping an eye on, especially now that they brought they solidified the center position with Brock Nelson and Charlie Coyle. They're getting a lot more production from the wings now because they're healthier compared to the first half of the season when they didn't have Drouin for a while. They didn't have Nichushkin. They didn't have Ross Colton for a bit. Their top line actually looks deep now. I remember early in the season seeing Colorado's forward lineup and going, it's just 4 guys basically. It's McKinnon, it's Lehkonen, it was Rantanen before the trade, and then maybe another guy or two, and then the drop off was just massive. Their bottom 6 looked AHL caliber, whereas now their forward group looks so deep. Sam Malinsky further down the lineup on the blue line has been really dynamic. They fixed their goaltending, right? That's massive, and they're 14-4-2 since the trade deadline. Plus, as far as a round 1 matchup against the Dallas Stars, there's still uncertainty around whether Miro Heiskanen is going to be ready for round 1. And even though the Stars have been winning a lot, quietly their underlying numbers have been pretty ugly. They've been really reliant on goaltending and just like some explosive individual offensive performances. So Dallas, even though Colorado is like going to be a tough series for the Avs to win, I kind of like their chances if Miro Heiskanen isn't going to be ready.
All this playoff talk, and it won't involve the Vancouver Canucks, and that is unfortunate, obviously, but I think we've known that that's the way things have been trending here for a little while. Again, they can be mathematically eliminated as early as Sunday night if results don't go their way this weekend. So they'll be doing a little scoreboard watching tonight, Minnesota on Long Island to take on Bo Horvat and the New York Islanders. That's really the only game that matters to the Canucks and their fading playoff chances, and then they're back in action 1 o'clock Saturday. Don't forget, we'll do Rink Wide after both of those games, so hopefully you can set aside a little bit of time as we break down the Canucks and the Ducks on Saturday, the Canucks and the Golden Knights on Sunday, and then Quads will be back fresh and ready off his long weekend to break it all down on Monday. Jacob Lazar, our technical producer. We didn't bring him into the show. I usually makes an appearance. Jacob, make an appearance. Just where are you?
Say hi.
I mentioned the Kings logo situation.
Oh, okay. Yeah, right. I know
the one time I turned my mic on was to defend Quads. Usually I'm turning my mic on to defend myself from Quads.
Then you thought better of it, so that's good. Yeah. All right. Hey, everybody enjoyed the weekend. Looks like it's going to be a pretty decent one, Harm. Fun talking hockey with you as always, and I look forward to Convo next week with you and Quads, and I will sit back and put my feet up and be a spectator. But thanks to everybody for checking out the Friday episode of Canucks Conversation.
Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.